Before we begin, imagine standing on the edge of a deadly cliff where one scream can change a man's fate forever. Tonight's story isn't just about danger, it's about courage, betrayal, and the moment a cowboy risked everything to save a young Apache woman no one else dared to help. If you love powerful frontier stories, make sure you subscribe, share this video, and drop your thoughts in the comments below to support Cowboy Chronicles. Now take a breath, because what happens next will stay with you long after the fire dies out. Let's start this story. The scream tore through the canyon air just as the last light of evening bled across the Arizona sky, sharp and haunting, the kind that made even the wind pause as if listening. Noya, the young Apache woman whose feet scrambled desperately for balance, felt the world tilt beneath her as the loose cliffside crumbled away. Her arms flew wide, fingers clawing for something solid, but nothing met her grasp except air that rushed past with merciless speed. She had only come to search for her missing brother, following the trail he'd left toward the high ledges, never imagining danger waited here instead of answers. She didn't see the faces of the two men behind her, not clearly, only their shadows creeping closer until she turned too late. One pushed her with a force meant to end a life quietly, a shove that would leave no witness, no voice left to accuse. As she fell, the sky spun violently, her breath ripped from her lungs, and for one terrible moment she thought she would never touch the earth again, until the rock ledge met her with brutal finality. Pain exploded up her side, tearing a scream from her chest, and then came the crack, sharp and sickening, as her legs snapped beneath her like brittle wood. Dust choked the back of her throat as she struggled to breathe, vision blurring with tears she didn't want to shed. She tried to move, but agony pinned her like a spear. Above, the men peered over the cliff edge, silhouettes against the darkening sky, their voices low and satisfied, as if her life or death meant nothing more than a bothersome task completed. One of them muttered that she wouldn't survive the fall, the other said leaving her was quicker. Their footsteps faded, swallowed by the pines, leaving her alone with nothing but the wind and the distant roar of the river waiting below. Noya pressed her palm against the rock to keep herself from sliding further. The drop beneath her was a hungry void, 1,000 feet of jagged death that promised no mercy if she lost her grip. She forced herself to think of her mother's voice telling her to be strong, of her brother who still needed her, of the will within her that refused to let strangers decide her fate. She tilted her head back and screamed again, the sound raw and desperate, hoping someone, anyone, would hear before darkness swallowed her completely. Far across the desert plain, Eli Mercer pulled his horse to an abrupt halt, his heart seizing in his chest as the scream reached him like a blade carried by the wind. Men didn't ride away from a sound like that, not men who could sleep at night, not men like him. His jaw tightened with a mix of instinct and old guilt he never spoke of, the kind that stirred whenever someone was in danger. He turned his horse sharply toward the cliffs, heels digging in, and the animal surged forward with powerful strides that devoured the distance between him and the scream. He didn't know what he would find, only that someone needed help, and he'd rather break his own bones than arrive too late. The dying light flickered across his face as he rode, outlining the determination etched in every line of his jaw. When he reached the clearing, he spotted tracks, 2 sets heading one way, a third leading dangerously close to the edge. He dismounted in a heartbeat, dropping to his knees as he reached the cliff and looked over. What he saw punched the air from his lungs. A young woman clung to a narrow ledge, her fingers trembling, her leg bent at an angle no human body should bend. "Don't move," Eli shouted, though he knew she barely could. She lifted her face, pain carving deep lines beneath her eyes, but there was strength there too, raw, unbroken fighting. "I'm coming down," he said, already looping his rope around the thick trunk of a juniper. She tried to speak, warning him of the danger, but he shook his head. Fear or not, danger or not, he wasn't the kind to watch someone die when he had a chance to stop it. He secured the rope around his waist and backed over the edge with slow, controlled steps, the cliff dust sliding beneath his boots. Every rock he grabbed felt loose, crumbling under the slightest pressure, but he kept going, steady and sure, lowering himself with the confidence of a man who had climbed worse for reasons much less noble. When he reached her, he braced himself against the wall, careful not to dislodge the ledge beneath her. Her breath came in short, sharp bursts, her face pale, sweat beading along her brow. "You're safe now," he said gently. She whispered something about the men who pushed her, but he hushed her softly, focusing on securing the rope around her before the ledge gave way entirely. Lifting her was harder than descending. She clung to him with what little strength she had left, her body trembling with pain, but he held her firmly, adjusting their weight as he signaled his horse with a sharp whistle. The rope tightened as the horse backed away, pulling them upward inch by slow inch. Noya buried her face against his chest, her breath warm and uneven, and he murmured reassurances even though he felt the cliffside shifting beneath his boots. When he finally hauled them over the top, he collapsed beside her, both panting, the last rays of daylight brushing across their faces. She stared at him through tears, or mixing with shock. "You saved me," she whispered, the words trembling from her lips. Eli brushed the dirt from his hands, breathing hard, and met her gaze with quiet steadiness. "Reckon I did what anyone ought to do," he said, though they both knew most men wouldn't have risked their lives for a stranger. He moved to her broken leg, examining the damage carefully. "I need to fix this," he warned. She nodded, bracing herself, gripping the ground with white-knuckled hands. He snapped the bone back into place with one swift motion. Her cry shook the air, but the pain eased almost instantly. As he wrapped her leg with strips torn from his saddle blanket, the forest behind them rustled loudly. Eli's hand flew to his gun, instincts sharpened by danger. Noya's breath caught, terror flickering in her eyes. "They're back," she whispered. Eli stood slowly, shoulders squared, revolver drawn, ready to defend her with every breath in his body. But the shapes emerging between the trees were not the men who attacked her. And as they stepped into the fading light, Noya's heart dropped. Because these men carried more danger than the ones who pushed her. The figures stepped out from between the pines with the quiet confidence of men who feared nothing in this world except dishonor. 4 Apache warriors approached, each painted for hunting, each gripping weapons shaped for battle rather than warning. At their center walked Riolo, Noya's older brother, taller than the others, his shoulders carrying the weight of responsibility he had learned far too young. When his gaze fell upon his sister, lying injured on the ground, something inside him snapped, the kind of fury that needed no words to ignite. Riolo's spear lowered instantly, directed straight at Eli's chest. "Step away from her," he commanded, his voice low, cold, barely controlled. Eli lifted his hands slowly, palms open, gun still holstered, not wanting to trigger a fight he had no wish to start. Noya reached toward her brother with a trembling hand, her voice strained with urgency. "Riolo, stop. He saved my life." But Riolo's eyes were storm clouds, filled with one question: who had harmed his sister? And the sight of a cowboy beside her was answer enough for his anger. Eli spoke carefully, every word measured. "Sir, I ain't your enemy. I came when I heard her scream. Those men, whoever they were, they're long gone." Riolo's spear did not waver. The other warriors closed in around Eli like wolves circling prey. The slightest twitch could end everything. But then Noya pushed herself upright despite the pain, grabbing her brother's wrist with surprising strength. "Please listen," she insisted. "He risked his life to bring me back up. If he hadn't come, I'd be dead." Riolo's jaw clenched. He shifted his gaze between his sister and the cowboy, the tension in his body slowly easing, though the suspicion remained sharp as a blade. Finally, with a slow exhale, he lifted the spear away from Eli's chest. Eli nodded once, respectful, but didn't relax, not entirely. One misunderstanding could still turn the forest into a battleground. Riolo knelt beside Noya, examining her injury, grief flickering across his face as he brushed a hand over her hair. "You should never have been alone," he murmured. "I told you the cliffs were unsafe." Noya swallowed, her voice small. "I was looking for Tekka. He didn't come home." Riolo stiffened. The name struck Eli's attention too, a missing child. That explained everything. Riolo rose, expression darkening. "We found his tracks near the river," he said, "but they were joined by others, men from the Black Mesa band. They must have taken him." Eli frowned. "The same men who pushed her?" Riolo nodded grimly. "They want to provoke war between our people. By harming her, they hoped we would blame your kind." Eli scrubbed a hand over his face. "Damn, trouble's already headed this way." Riolo's warriors exchanged uneasy glances. This wasn't just violence. This was strategy, evil wrapped in shadows. Eli stood slowly. "I'll help look for the boy," he offered, surprising even himself. Riolo raised a brow. "Why?" Eli answered without hesitation. "Because them men didn't care who they hurt, and I ain't about to let a child suffer just to start a fight nobody wants." Noya watched him with eyes full of gratitude, and for a moment, the air felt less tense. But Noya's condition could not be ignored. She needed care, warmth, safety, none of which existed here on the cold forest ground. Eli knelt and gently slid one arm beneath her knees and the other behind her back. "Easy now," he murmured. She tensed at first but soon relaxed, letting him lift her. Riolo's eyes narrowed in instinctive protectiveness, but he said nothing when he saw the care in Eli's hands. They moved through the forest quickly, guided by Riolo's warriors, until they reached the Apache camp nestled deep within the valley, surrounded by firelight and watchful eyes. As Eli carried her into the healer's lodge, whispers stirred through the camp, whispers of a cowboy entering sacred ground, whispers of a white man with a wounded Apache woman in his arms. But no one stopped him. They saw her leg, her pain, and they stepped aside. The healer, an elderly woman with braids streaked silver, directed Eli to lay Noya on a bed of soft furs. She inspected the injury with experienced hands, nodding at the splint Eli had made. "Good work," she murmured. "Not many outside our people know how to set bone correctly." Eli stepped back respectfully, unsure whether to stay or leave, but Noya reached for his wrist. "Please," she whispered, her voice fragile, "don't go yet." Riolo watched this with silent calculation. He didn't like the way his sister looked at this cowboy, but he understood that trust was not given lightly, especially by Noya. If she trusted him, then he had earned it. The healer prepared herbs, binding Noya's leg with stronger wrappings, her chants soft and rhythmic, filling the lodge with a sense of calm Eli hadn't felt in years. When she finally drifted into exhausted sleep, Riolo motioned for Eli to step outside. The night air was cool, the sky thick with stars that seemed close enough to touch. They walked a few paces away from the tents, standing at the edge of the firelight. Riolo crossed his arms, studying Eli as though trying to understand what kind of man would risk his life for someone not his own. "You showed bravery today," Riolo said at last. "Many men hear danger and ride the other direction." Eli nodded. "Ain't in my nature to leave someone in need." Riolo's next words carried weight. "If you wish to help find my brother, I will not refuse. But know this, the men who took him are ruthless. They will not hesitate to spill blood." Eli's voice was steady. "They already tried." Riolo's jaw tightened. "Then at dawn we ride." Eli glanced toward the healer's lodge. "She'll be safe here," Riolo nodded. "My people will guard her with their lives." Eli exhaled slowly, relieved. He didn't know why he cared so much, not yet, but something about Noya had stayed with him since the moment he saw her clinging to that ledge. Something fierce, something unbroken. Dawn crept slowly across the sky as Eli and the Apache warriors rode out, following the path along the river. They found boot prints, broken reeds, and a scrap of fabric torn on a thorn bush. Signs of a struggle, signs of a child pulled along unwillingly. The tracks led them deeper into the canyons, where the air grew still and the rocks towered like silent guards. Just when they thought the trail had gone cold, Eli heard a faint cry coming from between two boulders. He signaled for silence. They approached carefully, weapons ready. And there, hidden in a small hollow, they found Tekka shivering, bruised but alive. Before they could celebrate, a rustle erupted from behind. The kidnappers, realizing their trap had failed, launched an attack with a fury born of desperation. Arrows whistled through the air. Eli ducked behind a rock, firing warning shots. Riolo fought fiercely, his spear moving like lightning. Battle was short but violent. Eli tackled one of the men, disarming him with a swift blow. Riolo struck another down before he could reach Tekka. When the dust settled, the danger was gone. The boy ran into Riolo's arms, sobbing into his brother's chest. Eli watched silently, heart heavy with relief. By the time they returned to camp, Noya was awake, her eyes brightening when she saw her brother safe. Tekka ran to her, hugging her gently, whispering apologies she silenced with a kiss to his forehead. Then Noya looked up at Eli. Silence passed between them, deep, unspoken, powerful. She reached for his hand. "Thank you," she said softly, "for my life, for my brother, for everything." Eli swallowed, unsure how to respond, but the warmth in her gaze told him there would be more to their story, more than either could yet understand. Riolo approached, placing a hand on Eli's shoulder. "You have our respect," he said simply, "and our friendship." For a cowboy who had never belonged anywhere, the words cut deep. As the campfire crackled beneath the starlit sky, Noya whispered one last sentence, one that would stay with him forever. "You didn't just save me, Eli. You changed the path of my life." But she was wrong about one thing. Because she had changed his too.